Woodruff joined ABC News in 1996 and has covered major stories throughout the country and around the world for the network. On January 29, 2006, while reporting on U.S. and Iraqi security forces, Woodruff was seriously injured by a roadside bomb that struck his vehicle near Taji, Iraq. So can you tell us a little bit about what happened more specifically in Iraq on this day and what you suffered as a result?
You know, people ask me that a lot. What is it that I actually remembered when this happened? I certainly know what the story was that we're pursuing in Taji, which is not far away from Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. And we wanted to show what was being done in terms of the war, because that's right when the US forces were wanting to kind of pass the power and the responsibility over to the Iraqi military. Obviously, it did not happen very fast, but that was in the midst of it. We're trying to go village by village with the US and Iraqi military together to see if they could figure out a way to bring peace to that country without just fighting each other. You know, we'll see how it ended up after that. Anyway, we're driving down the road in actually an Iraqi tank, and there was an improvised explosive device just off to the left, an IED, that was detonated, which find out later that it was by probably by cell phone. Mm-hmm. It was detonated that way. And that thing blew off to the left. I don't know if you've read the book that my wife and I wrote not long, about a year, well, wrote it over the next year after I came back to recover. Kind of tells the details of exactly what happened. So I don't know how many details you want. But my cameraman and I, Doug Bowe, were out the top of the tank and really doing what we call a stand-up. I'm saying something to the camera to explain what's happening on the sand around the road, and that the trees were, lining up along the side of the road. And that's just one with the driver, it was an Iraqi driver, turned to us and said, you should probably go inside. But it was just 3 seconds later when this thing just blasted. I was hit instantly by the air power, and it knocked me out instantly. And then that was followed by rocks and metal that pierced through the left part of my face. My cameraman, Doug Bowe, was knocked out for a few seconds. He fell down on the top of the tank. And then when I was knocked out, it was instant that I just suddenly went unconscious. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of remember that my body was sort of floating underneath me. And I fell down about 2 minutes later. I woke up and I saw my team around me. My producer and my sound man were down inside. Doug was still up on top of the tank, and I asked them if we're alive, and they said we're alive, and that's really the last thing I remembered until I woke up in Bethesda Naval 36 days later, surrounded by my family and my friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, just hearing about it and watching it and just knowing about it when it first happened, it gets me choked up. Are there ways that you're still recovering, quote unquote?
No, Alexander, you know this world pretty well, right? I mean, you really hope in the very beginning you're going to get back to absolute normality, the way your life used to be. But it doesn't come back 100%.
Right.
I think there's certainly things that you can do when you get hit by something. Mine was an explosion. It's hitting me on top of a tank in a war zone. But there's people that have almost exactly the same kind of aphasia, a blast to the brain on the left side of my head. They get it in a car crash, or playing football, or fall off the roof and land on the left side of their head. So there's a million brothers and sisters of me that have gone and suffered the same way. And I think every one of them, I don't think anybody wants to hear, don't worry, you're all going to be normal again. I think what I will say is you will get better. Mm-hmm. To some degree. I mean, time with the brain always fixes things. We understand things more about what happens to a brain when it's injured now than we ever did in history. There's huge advancements. And sometimes I do tell people, this is maybe one of the few good things about a war like was happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, is that medically, scientifically, we learned so much, not only just about what brain injury is, but also ways that we can try to improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. You and your wife, Lee, started the Bob Woodruff Foundation, which helps injured veterans with support programs and access to world-renowned care. So can you tell us a little bit more about the foundation and its mission and where you guys are at? Like,
You know, it's interesting. You know, when I was hit, it was right at it was the peak of these, you know, improvised explosive devices. These big bombs are being detonated over in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is happening all the time. And there's so many wounds because, you know, in terms of brain injury. So in some ways I was surrounded on the 3rd floor and then ultimately the 5th floor of Bethesda Naval when I was hit, unconscious. And my family would come in and they saw all these other, lot of them were Marines, because this was Bethesda Naval, which Marines are through that for the, and some for inside the Navy. So there's so many other, they were unconscious, families were there, but there's some places, some of the guys there that did not really have that many family members there, or support from family and friends, partly because there was really the families of those that were wounded were really not treated completely properly from the government, because in some ways this was so new and the government was so overwhelmed. You know, the VA was overwhelmed, the DOD was overwhelmed, people could not even get the time off from work to come and visit, or some of them just didn't have the even ability to travel. So we realized there was, in some ways, there's not enough kind of care that they're getting inside the hospital, but mostly they got amazing medical and science help while they're in there. But we also saw was that when people were then going home to their communities, that's where they kind of let go. They just were not getting enough at all. So my family says, why don't we just start a little foundation to try to raise some money and help those that are not getting quite the same love as you are from us and our family. And they know I was 44 years old at the time, and some of these are, you know, 19 years old that were badly wounded, and they just needed some help. So we decided to start this foundation. I don't think we ever thought it would get as large and successful as it has, because we knew that we got a lot of attention from getting hit because I'd been on television and all of that, and I was anchoring World News Tonight, and we knew there were a lot of people that we found that wanted to do something, but it was difficult for them to find the right place to commit to pay their money, you know, donate their money to. And so we created one where we could find the best place to put it. And I think that people were frustrated because they didn't know how they could do enough, and they did. So we started doing that in the very beginning, when people going back to their communities. That was the main, concentration for us, was to, like, sometimes you have to get them a mattress in because they're not able to get enough place to sleep for people that were visiting, or people were not getting enough medical care because they're out in the middle of the countryside. They had to get ability to get it to them. There's a million different things we do. That's largely on their medical needs. And then it changed into more of the recovery from brain injuries. Those with amputations, they were not able to get jobs. There are a million things that people needed help with.
How have you seen, I guess, the stigma